History is full of strange and disturbing stories, but most of them never make it into the classroom. Behind the official dates and names are events so bizarre, so unsettling, that they feel more like horror stories than history. Today, we're counting down 10 of the darkest and strangest events in history they never taught you. Stay until the end, because number 1 is straight out of a nightmare. 10. The Cadaver Synod, 897 AD. In 897, the Catholic Church held one of the most grotesque trials in history. Pope Stephen VI hated his predecessor, Pope Formosus, with such bitterness that even death couldn't silence their feud. Stephen had Formosus's corpse exhumed, dressed it in papal robes, and seated it on a throne inside a Roman church. For a horrified audience, the rotting body was put on trial. A trembling deacon was forced to speak for the corpse, while charges of perjury and betrayal of the church were read aloud. The verdict was inevitable: guilty. 3 fingers of Formosus's right hand, the ones used for blessings, were cut off. The body was stripped of its robes, dragged through the streets, and dumped into the river Tiber. The spectacle shocked all of Europe, and within months, Pope Stephen himself was overthrown, imprisoned, and strangled. 9. The Great Molasses Flood, 1919. On January 15, 1919, Boston's North End witnessed a disaster as surreal as it was deadly. A giant steel tank holding more than 2 million gallons of molasses suddenly burst. The explosion sent a sticky wave of brown liquid surging through the streets at more than 30 miles per hour. The wave was 25 feet high at its peak, powerful enough to flatten buildings and sweep away wagons. Horses and people were trapped in the sticky flood, unable to escape. By the time it was over, 21 people were dead and over 150 injured. Cleanup took months. Even decades later, locals swore that on hot summer days, you could still smell molasses in the streets. 8. The War of the Oaken Bucket, 1325. In medieval Italy, city-states often went to war over land and/or power, but in 1325, Modena and Bologna clashed over something far less important: a bucket. Soldiers from Modena raided Bologna and stole a wooden bucket from the city well. Bologna demanded its return. Modena refused. Insults turned to threats, and threats to war. Bologna raised an army of 30,000 men. Modena answered with just 7,000. They met at the Battle of Zappolino, where more than 12,000 men died. Modena won the day and kept the bucket as a trophy. You can still see it today, proudly displayed in Modena's City Hall. Proof that thousands once died over a piece of wood. 7. The Dancing Plague, 1518. In Strasbourg, France, during the summer of 1518, a woman walked into the street and began to dance. At first, it seemed harmless, but she couldn't stop. Within days, dozens had joined her. Within weeks, hundreds were caught up in the strange frenzy. They danced until their feet bled, collapsing in exhaustion. Some suffered heart attacks and died. Local authorities believed the best cure was more dancing, so they brought in musicians and even built stages. But the music only encouraged the madness. The dancing plague lasted for weeks before it finally burned itself out. Historians still debate whether it was mass hysteria, poisoned rye bread, or something else entirely. 6. The Anarchy, 1135 to 1153. When King Henry of England died in 1135, he left no clear male heir. His daughter Matilda was supposed to take the throne, but his nephew Stephen seized it first. The result was nearly 2 decades of chaos known simply as the Anarchy. Nobles built private castles, raised private armies, and terrorized the countryside. Villages were burned, crops were stolen, ordinary people starved. One chronicler wrote that Christ and his saints slept, as if God himself had abandoned England. The war finally ended in 1153 with a compromise. Stephen would remain king, but Matilda's son would inherit after him. Still, for almost 20 years, England was a land of famine, lawlessness, and despair. The Great Emu War, 1932. In 1932, Australia declared war on birds. After World War I, returning soldiers turned to farming, but their crops were devastated by huge flocks of emus, giant flightless birds standing over 6 feet tall. Desperate for help, farmers turned to the government, which sent soldiers with machine guns to kill the emus. But the birds were too fast and too smart. They scattered, regrouped, and outran the soldiers' bullets. After weeks of failure, the army admitted defeat. The emus had won. To this day, Australians laugh about the Emu War, proof that sometimes nature beats technology. 4. The Revenge of Pedro I. In 14th century Portugal, King Pedro I loved a woman named Inés de Castro, but his father disapproved and Inés was murdered on his orders. When Pedro became king, he exacted a revenge that shocked the court. According to legend, he had Inés's body exhumed, placed on a throne, and crowned as queen. He forced the nobles to swear loyalty to her and even kiss her decayed hand. Pedro hunted down her killers and had their hearts ripped out. To his supporters, it was an act of justice. To others, it was madness. Either way, the story of Pedro and his corpse queen became one of Europe's darkest love tales. 3. The ghost ship, Mary Celeste, 1872. On December 5, 1872, a merchant ship called the Mary Celeste was found drifting in the Atlantic Ocean. Her sails were up, her cargo was intact, and the crew's belongings were undisturbed. Food was still laid out on the table, but the lifeboat was missing, and not a single person remained on board. There were no signs of a struggle, no storm damage, no explanation. The crew had simply vanished. The Mary Celeste has remained one of the great maritime mysteries, an empty ship sailing the seas, her secrets lost forever. 2. The Curse of Tutankhamun's Tomb, 1922. In 1922, archaeologist Howard Carter discovered the tomb of Tutankhamun in Egypt's Valley of the Kings. It was one of the greatest finds in history, untouched treasures sealed for more than 3,000 years. But soon, strange deaths began to follow those connected with the tomb. Lord Carnarvon, who funded the expedition, died suddenly from an infected mosquito bite. Others also met mysterious ends. Rumors spread of a curse. An inscription was said to warn, "Death shall come on swift wings to he who disturbs the king." Whether coincidence or something more, the pharaoh's curse captured the imagination of the world and has never been forgotten. 1. Vlad the Impaler's Forest of the Dead. In the 1400s, Vlad III of Wallachia faced invasion from the Ottoman Empire. Outnumbered, he turned to terror as his weapon. When the Ottomans advanced, they came across a sight out of a nightmare. Thousands of wooden stakes lined the battlefield, each with a body impaled upon it. The Forest of the Impaled, as it became known, horrified the invaders. Some accounts claim the Ottoman army retreated at the sight alone. This gruesome act cemented Vlad's reputation as one of the most terrifying rulers in history and inspired the legend of Count Dracula. These 10 stories prove that history is often stranger and far darker than fiction. From cursed tombs to ghost ships, from wars over buckets to armies defeated by birds, the past is full of tales more shocking than legend. Which of these events surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments below. And if you want more forgotten history and dark mysteries, subscribe to Hours Lost in Time. Because the past isn't gone, it lingers in shadows, waiting to be uncovered.